As far as visual storytelling goes, comic art is a very young discipline which really came into its own at the turn of the previous century. To illustrate, this is Gardner's Art Through the Ages. It showcases the product of human creativity, your painting, sculpture, ceramics, architecture and whatnot, from the dawn of humankind to roughly around 1990. This is how thick the book is. Not intimidating at all. The first comic book as we know it today dates back to 1897, marking the start of the platinum age of comic books, which falls there in the greater scheme of things. This was preceded by the first multi-panel cartoon strip 50 years earlier in 1827. Caricature, which is considered the father of cartooning, falls round about there, dating back to the 1500s. Manga, of course, can be traced back to the 1100s, which is kind of stepping on my point there, Japan. But you get the gist. Very young medium indeed. My name is Vernon. Welcome to ToonSchool's History of Cartoons timeline, where we explore the history of art through the eyes of cartooning. Now, you may ask yourself, if it's such a new discipline, why are we going all the way back? Because that is the beauty of art. Art history is this glorious tapestry of artists inspiring artists, ideas inspiring new ideas, art movements evolving from the previous movement, art movements kicking against the previous movements, where all the threads of visual art and design come together in this beautiful, colorful dance. You'd also be surprised to find that some of the graphic elements that we use in modern day cartooning and comics can be traced back to some of the ancient civilizations. So without further ado, let's set the dial and visit the Stone Age. Mystical fog. So we're going to start at the very beginning because, if Maria von Trapp taught us anything, is that it's a very good place to start. So prehistory marks the period between the use of stone tools and writing and the invention of writing systems, which is also known as pre-literary history. We know it better from movies like Ice Age and The Croods, although The Croods were actually set in a fictional period, the Cretaceous period. As far as terms are concerned, honestly, you know what? When I grew up, we had two. We had Before Christ and Anno Domini, and that was enough for us. But times have changed. There's more terms. I really tried to keep it. I wanted uniformity in the timeline. But I think it was very early on in the process that I realized that is just not going to happen. As far as the Stone Age is concerned, just to give you a little bit of context, the Stone Age is made up of three periods: the Paleolithic, the Mesolithic, and the Neolithic periods. The Paleolithic can be further broken down into the Lower Paleolithic, Middle and Upper Paleolithic, with the Mesolithic depending on the area. Now, as far as dates are concerned, there are so many indiscrepancies between the sources, some varying with up to 15,000 years most of the time. And then there was this one artifact that I found that there were 200,000 years of difference between the dates. I mean, that's not even in the ballpark. That's just wrong. So if you came here for very specific dates today, I can just quote Aragon before they stormed the Black Gate in saying, "That is not this day. That is not this day," for Frodo. It's also worth mentioning that in the Lower Paleolithic sees the discovery of fire, where humankind started to utilize controlled fire. This obviously had its advantages. We could see in the dark, see where you're going. The women stopped being cold all the time. We could fend off animals and predators. And then, people stopped dying from bad mammoth meat, which is always a positive thing. And then also, actually very interesting, evolution in storytelling, which one can actually see. People, there's a fire, the community coming together around the fire, telling stories about the hunt of the day. And, I would love to believe that the invention of fire actually also helped the creatives of the tribe, because they could actually work at nighttime instead of pacing the cave and thinking about all the things they're going to be creating tomorrow once the big ball in the sky comes back. We've been there. We know. There are various ways in which these early humans express themselves creatively. The most common example would be your rock and cave paintings known as pictographs. Pictographs are drawings and paintings made in stone. The earliest known example of these would be your rock drawings found in the Blombos Cave in South Africa, which my fellow South Africans would appreciate because the Rainbow Nation rocks. This, of course, marks the dawn of visual communication in all its forms. A lot of these disciplines and styles trace their origins back to prehistoric cave paintings. And by extension, also, we can do the same with cartooning. Now, if you want to, because someone actually did, you can say that these were your first examples of cartoons. I see what they did there. If you take cartooning as being a very stylized version where you reduce all details to simplified line work, I can see why they did that. I don't necessarily agree. I don't really think it was a stylistic choice. I think it was more like a 2-year-old learning to draw. You draw how you can with, what you know. Rock artists used a number of materials and techniques to achieve the product. With a color palette in very natural tones, you have red and yellow ochre, black and white, and green, blue, and violet in some cases. These pigments were made from iron-rich clay for the red and yellow, crushed charcoal, and burnt animal bone to create black, and then also eggshells and minerals. And then for white, one of the ways they created white was with bird droppings, which is odd, but if you ever run out of titanium white now, don't discard the bird droppings on your balcony. These pigments were then turned into a workable paint by mixing it with painting agents like water, plant sap, egg whites, animal fat and blood, and urine. Yes, once again proving that if an artist wants to art, they will find a way regardless of the medium. So the techniques they used to apply this were hands and fingers, brushes made from animal hair, feathers, or split sticks, and then they blew pigment onto the surface through reeds. I'll show you the example now. Now, these rock paintings were really beautifully depicted or utilized in Ice Age and in the Crudes. Really stayed true to the color palette, depicting it in a beautiful way. I really enjoy this storytelling technique that they do these days with animation, or in some animation where there's either an origin story or a flashback story within a story where they depict it using a different drawing style. We saw this in The Prince of Egypt, where they used ancient or Egyptian hieroglyphs to depict the story of Moses and the baby genocide. Also, we saw it in Kung Fu Panda 2, the one with the peacock, where they show Poe's origin story utilizing the Chinese shadow puppets. Also a baby genocide. And also in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, with the Tale of the Three Brothers, where they use this beautiful sheer sort of ink meets shadows animation, which was really, really beautifully done. And don't even get me started on just the mind-blowing effects in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse as far as combining different drawing styles are concerned. The next type of cave paintings that we see are called petroglyphs. While your pictographs were painted onto rock surfaces, the petroglyph is a carving or inscription made by scratching into the rock surface. Both of these cave paintings as a whole, the subject matter vary from humans and animals to anthropomorphic characters, which I think this would be a very good example above that wheel that looks like a Trivial Pursuit pie holder. There's a character there that, is it anthropomorphic, or did the chief maybe have a very fancy headdress? We don't know. Also, geometric elements and symbols, and then handprints and hand stencils. The hand stencils is the example of the pigment that was blown through reeds. This is how they achieved the hand stencils. Also, just take note of the feet in the top right-hand corner. It's just sort of good to know that, like many of us and AI, they couldn't draw feet either. The feet had 6 toes, and then later on on the same wall, you see that the feet had 5 toes. So somebody started counting. As far as function of these cave paintings are concerned, there's a lot of speculation about the purpose of the rock art or the cave paintings, whether it was functional, teaching aids, instructing the young, communication and storytelling, or whether it had shamanic purposes and magical purposes, sort of designed to gain power over the animal to ensure a successful hunt. Nobody knows and nobody's telling. Then also very noteworthy is that some of these cave paintings were actually sequential, which means that they followed in an order, telling a story, which threads through the ages. We'll see it a lot in the upcoming videos, sequential art popping up, and of course leading eventually to the art form sequential art, which is our comic books, manga, storyboards and graphic novels. Also maybe a good time to mention that none of these images are mine. I've never been in a cave or a spelunk in my life, unless you count that one time, but I think that wasn't as much a cave as it was a hole. So all these images are listed were found on public domain websites. Everything is listed. There's certificates. It was quite the jumping through hoops. If I skipped anyone or missed anything, feel free to comment below. The next form of art from the Stone Age that we're going to explore is portable art. The first kind of portable art were sculptures appearing in both figurative and non-figurative forms. Today, I'm really just going to focus on the most well-known, which would be your Venus figurines. Now, also speculation about the purpose of the Venus figurines, whether they formed part of some ritual, whether they were toys for kids, or whether it's just something pretty that they wanted to carry with them. And also, I think the most common denominator would be that they acted as symbols of fertility or depictions of the mother goddess. The Venus of Willendorf is the Venus that you would most often find in history books. I've actually used her as reference for one of my own illustrations in my as yet unpublished graphic novel. The Venus, I wanted to depict Lilith from Jewish mythology, and I wanted to depict her as a plus-size figure. And I thought, what better way than to actually go back to the original plus-sized figure. The earliest examples of the Venuses were the Venus of Tantan, found in Morocco, and the Venus of Berakat Rum, found in Syria. There seems to be a lot of debate about this. That Venus of Tantan goes back to the lower Paleolithic, and Berakat Rum dates to right at the beginning of the middle Paleolithic. There's a lot of debate about the validity of these artifacts. Some guy came in and said, look, I found another Venus, and the other guys were like, dude, that's a rock. The Venuses came in all shapes and sizes. There's really a lot of them. You see the Venus of Hollefels that sort of looks like a chicken with a very capacious bosom. And then the Venus of Monroe's looks like it was all about the junk in the trunk. Honestly, I can't believe I said that, but go Switzerland. Then there's also the Venus of Dolny Vestunici. that was made out of clay and basically is the oldest known ceramic figurine, which gives us 5 points for ceramics. I really wanted to say Gryffindor. Also just note that this is not the earliest example of pottery and ceramics. Pottery and they were like vessels and stuff found as well. The earliest pottery goes back to China, and I really want to say Japan, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. As a matter of fact, you can correct me on anything. I don't make myself out to be an historian. I'm just really passionate about art history and specifically the history of cartooning. So if you know better, or if you just think you do, or if you have anything exciting or interesting that you can add to the conversation, please feel free to do so in the comments. We're all here to learn, so I welcome any new information. The next type of portable art that we are looking at would be your decorative natural objects. These were, depending on the culture, bone, stone, fossils, antler, ivory, teeth, and shells that were then modified, carved out, painted on, engraved, or perforated, and used for a variation of things from jewelry and adornment to functional tools. Now here I just couldn't resist. I have to also mention the musical instruments that were found, especially the flutes that were found in Germany and apparently is still in a working condition. I just love the fact that there's music there as well. Music and laughter is the one thing that connects us all. And it changes the fact that they had it from the dawn of humankind. It just changes the image I have of around the campfire. You had the community telling stories and eating, which I'm a big fan of. And then also a guy with a flute, and you can bet there was a guy with drums as well. There should always be a guy with a drum. Then portable art as well. We're looking at engraving. I'm sort of separating engraving, specifically incised motifs made on these natural objects, like another example would be your perforated battens, which they use for the making of rope and twine and straightening arrow and spear shafts. I really underestimated these early peoples. I honestly just thought they were all about hunting and, I don't know, walking into walls. The earliest examples of engravings would be found on the Sudan shell that were found on the Indonesian island of Java. This is a very important artifact because it's also the very first and earliest artifact showing, some sort of human creativity, dating back to 540,000 years. There's also sort of a debate whether it should be considered art. Yes, Eddie, but is it art? Another example of engravings would be your elephant tibia that was found in Germany. A lot of stuff happened in Germany where you can very clearly see the carvings on the ivory. The reason why I'm sort of focusing on engraving is because engraving forms a part that started a whole art style or art discipline on it by itself. It forms part of printmaking, and printmaking, I don't want to generalize and say that all forms of printmaking, but I know many forms of printmaking approach the depiction of value in the same way that we do as inkers when you do inking for comic art. It's depicting grayscale by only using black. So you have to sort of get around it because you can't shade in the same way that you would with a pencil. So, 5 points for printmaking. Finally, we are getting to our larger art forms. The first of them being rock art. Rock art, there are two kinds of rock art. The first one is the megaliths, large stone monuments or structures. The Stonehenge in England being the best example of this. And then also your dolmens. The top picture is from Ireland, a dolmen found in Ireland. The bottom one said Cornwall, but I'm not entirely certain because the rest of the website said differently. I know them best from Asterix. You see dolmens used or popping up all through the Asterix albums. If you are an Asterix fan, in the same way that I am, I really like you already. The second kind of rock art would be your Petroforms, where your Petroglyphs were carvings made into stone. The Petroforms are rocks laid out in patterns. Now, frankly, I'm just surprised it's still there. I don't want to be funny, but it's 300, 400,000 years ago, and it hasn't been carried off or vandalized. Like I said, I don't want to be funny, but have you met humans? Then finally, as far as big pieces are concerned, you're looking at geoglyphs, drawings made on the ground. Now, I categorize, for the purpose of this video, I categorize geoglyphs under land art. Never quote me on this. If you are at that very fancy gallery exhibition opening, never say it's a form of land art. Land art or earth art, environmental art, is actually an art movement that originated in the 90s and 60s and 70s. I just really needed a heading, and so I went for land art. These land arts are actually quite impressive. They're very, crop circle-y. And if you look at the anatomy, maybe not, we've all, as artists, we've all done better. But the fact that it's on the side of a mountain really is very impressive. And then a lot can be said about the engineering skills, especially of the megaliths, about the engineering skills of the time. I would love to think that there was a Stone Age artist one day just sort of looking out of her cave and going, you know what, I could so do something with that hill. I am a big fan of drawing inspiration from history. And to wrap things up, we are going to look at cartoon artists who did exactly that, drawing their inspiration from prehistoric art. Starting with Prehistoric Peeps, created by Edward Tennyson Reed, and first appeared in Punch magazine in 1893. It published in book form in 1894 and adapted into live-action silent films in 1905. Now, I'm not certain whether it was a series of live-action films or only one. I heard it both ways, so if you know, let me know. The one thing that there does seem to be consensus about is that the Prehistoric Peeps is the oldest cartoon based in the prehistoric era. The next example is our Antediluvian Ancestors, created by Frederick Burr Opper, which first appeared in the New York Journal in 1901 and published in book form in 1903. With both of these and the one coming up, we see a Stone Age where man and dinosaurs lived in harmony, with technology and social conditions reflecting the age in which the cartoon itself was created. We see the same thing, or saw the same thing in the Crude's sequel, A New Age, where you have nods to our modern day technology, the TV, big screen TV, the elevator, I wanted to say, was in there, and I'm sure there's other examples as well. They did the same in Ice Age, one of the, Ice Age 300, where they had they had cell phones, or a version of cell phones. This obviously is very important in storytelling because it makes it more relatable for the viewer or the reader. The final example is our favorite modern Stone Age family, the Flintstones, created by William Hanna and Joseph Barbera in 1960, and is to this day a very popular cartoon, appearing from anything from animated sitcoms right through to chewable vitamins, which apparently is still on sale today. I always say to the ToonSchoolers, I love to see a cartoon like this that was created in the Flintstones case 65 years ago, and it's still standing the test of time. It sort of became part of the human fiber. Everybody knows them, and it must be quite amazing for an artist to know or to see your cartoon live through and still be relatable generation of generation and still speaking to people. We see the same with Popeye, which was created in 1929 and is nearly 100 years old. It really is quite remarkable. Now, to this very day, you will find actually on Comiclopedia, there's modern day comic artists who still works on or draw their inspiration from prehistoric art in the form of either comic books or graphic novels, which brings us to the end of our travels for today. And that brings us to the outro. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. This episode laid a solid foundation for our cartoon history timeline, a journey during which we will explore the evolution of cartooning through the ages. Be sure to tune in for the next episode, where we will venture into the wondrous worlds of some of the ancient civilizations. That's really just way too much alliteration for one sentence. Until I see you again, go out, be great, live creatively in very many directions, and may the creative force be with you. And for those of you watching this video in 2525, this is a book.